I found my fiancé's hidden diary, documenting our entire relationship as a social experiment. It was tucked away in the back of his closet, shoved behind a stack of old board games he never touched. Dusty, unassuming, like a forgotten secret waiting to be unearthed. And believe me, when I found it, the ground beneath my feet just vanished. If you're hearing this, and you're finding yourself caught in something that just feels off, or you're just someone who likes a good story, hit that subscribe button. Seriously, it helps us keep these stories coming. And while you're there, a quick like and a share with anyone you think might dig this kind of raw, unfiltered truth goes a long way. Leave a comment too. Let me know what you'd do in this situation. Your thoughts mean everything. My name is Alex, and I guess I'm here to confess, maybe? Spill the beans? I don't even know what the right word is. It's like my life, the one I thought I was building brick by careful brick, just imploded, and I'm standing in the rubble, trying to figure out which pieces are even mine anymore. It all started, or rather it all felt like it started, about 6 months ago. That's when I found the diary. But the story, the real story, the one that led me to that dusty closet, it goes back further. It goes back to Liam. Liam. My Liam. Or the Liam I thought was mine. We met at Sarah's birthday party. Remember Sarah? The one with the ridiculously oversized hat and the laugh that could shatter glass? Yeah, that's Sarah. It was a typical Friday night in the city. That kind of humid summer air that clings to you. The distant wail of sirens. The low thrum of traffic. I was nursing a lukewarm beer, feeling that familiar ache of being slightly out of place, when he walked in. He had this easy confidence, a crooked smile that made you lean in, and eyes that held a spark of something intelligent. Not just smart, but aware. He was talking to someone about some obscure band I'd vaguely heard of, and he was dissecting their sound like it was some intricate puzzle. I was hooked. We talked for hours that night, about music, about books, about the dumbest movies we'd ever loved. He had this way of making you feel like the only person in the room, like your thoughts, no matter how trivial, were the most fascinating things he'd ever heard. He was funny, but not in a loud, attention-seeking way. It was a dry wit, observational, the kind that makes you snort with laughter when you least expect it. By the end of the night, he'd asked for my number, and I practically handed him my phone. Things moved fast after that, maybe too fast in retrospect, but at the time, it felt perfect, organic, like two pieces clicking into place. He'd show up at my apartment after work, sometimes with takeout from that amazing Thai place down the street, sometimes just to sit on my couch and watch bad TV with me. He remembered the little things, the way I liked my coffee, the fact that I hated cilantro, the stupid inside jokes we'd started to collect. He was thoughtful, genuinely, deeply thoughtful. He'd send me links to articles he thought I'd find interesting, or playlists of songs that reminded him of our conversations. He'd leave little notes for me on the fridge, just silly things like, "Hope you have a great day," or "Don't forget your umbrella." It felt like a fairy tale, honestly. I'd tell my friends about him, about how he was so different, so real. They'd roll their eyes, of course, but secretly, I think they were a little jealous. We dated for a year, then he moved in. Our first apartment together was in the suburbs, a little fixer-upper with a decent yard. It was a big step, but it felt right. We were talking about marriage, about the future. He'd bring up kids, hypothetical dog breeds, vacation destinations. He painted a picture of a life so vivid, so concrete, that I could practically see myself living it. He even started talking about a ring. He'd point out styles he liked when we were out shopping. "Oh, that's interesting," he'd say, his eyes lingering on a delicate diamond. I'd blush, pretend to be nonchalant, but my heart would do this little flutter. This was it, I thought. This was the real thing. He was ambitious, Liam. He worked in tech, a high-pressure job, but he never let it consume him. He'd come home and he'd be present. He'd ask about my day, listen intently, offer advice or just a sympathetic ear. He was my rock, my confidant, my best friend. I'd found someone who not only loved me, but understood me. Or so I thought. The first tiny crack, the almost imperceptible hairline fracture, wasn't even about infidelity or anything dramatic. It was small. We were at a friend's housewarming party, one of those awkward gatherings where you only know a few people. Liam was his usual charming self, making conversation, making everyone feel at ease. I, on the other hand, was feeling that familiar social anxiety creep in. I retreated to a corner, watching the ebb and flow of people, feeling a bit overwhelmed. Liam noticed. He came over, put his arm around me, and said, loud enough for a few people to hear, "Don't worry, babe, you're with me. You don't have to talk to anyone if you don't want to." It was meant to be reassuring, I know, but something about it felt patronizing. Like he was putting me on display, highlighting my shyness as if it were a quirk, a pet project. I brushed it off, of course. He was just being sweet. Then there were the late nights. Not the fun, spontaneous ones where we'd stay up talking for hours. These were different. He'd be working on his laptop, claiming there was a big project deadline. He'd be in his home office, the door closed, and when I'd ask if he needed anything, he'd be a little too quick to say, "Nope, I'm good, just need to focus." Sometimes I'd hear him typing, the rhythmic click-clack of the keys, and it would go on for hours. I'd bring him a snack, a glass of water, and he'd thank me, his eyes glued to the screen. He was always so polite, so considerate, almost too considerate. I started to notice little things missing. A favorite book of mine on his shelf, one I knew he'd enjoyed. A photo I'd taken of us on our first vacation, the one he'd always said was his favorite. When I asked about them, he'd shrug. "Oh, I must have misplaced it. Don't remember seeing that book around lately." It was easy to dismiss. Life gets messy, things get lost. But the feeling, that tiny nagging unease, it started to grow. One evening, I was looking for a spare charger. I'd rummaged through his desk drawers, his nightstand, everywhere. I knew he kept a few spares in the closet, so I went to his side. It was a typical walk-in closet, organized but not obsessively so. Clothes neatly hung, shoes on shelves, some boxes stacked up. I was moving a box of old sweaters, trying to get to the back where I thought the chargers might be, when my hand brushed against something hard and flat. A binder. Not like a school binder, but one of those thicker, more executive-looking ones, the kind you'd use for important documents. It was dark blue, almost black. It felt out of place, too substantial to be just random paperwork. Curiosity, that insidious little demon, pricked at me. I pulled it out. The cover was blank. No labels, no markings. I hesitated. This was Liam's space, his private things. But the unease, the unanswered questions, they were louder than my reservations. My hands were shaking as I opened it. The first page wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a letter or a financial statement. It was a title page, typed, stark, and chilling. Project Nightingale, Phase 1, The Relationship Experiment. Below that, in smaller font, subject, Alexandra Davies. Duration, ongoing, objective. To meticulously document and analyze the development and progression of a romantic partnership under controlled conditions, with a focus on behavioral observation and emotional response. My breath hitched, my vision blurred for a second. This had to be a joke, a really, really twisted joke. But the meticulousness of the title, the clinical tone, it felt too real. I flipped to the next page. It was dated, not today, not yesterday, but the day we first met. The entry was brief, observational. Subject AD, encountered at social gathering. Initial assessment, reserved, intelligent, possesses a subtle vulnerability, exhibits signs of social anxiety, demonstrates genuine interest in intellectual discourse, proceeding to stage 2, initiating contact. I kept reading, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. Each entry was a blow, a betrayal deeper than I could have imagined. He hadn't just documented our relationship, he had cataloged it. He'd observed my reactions to everything. My excitement when he surprised me with tickets to my favorite band, his notes. Subject exhibits heightened positive emotional response to auditory stimuli, correlating with prior stated preferences. Reinforce this behavior for continued positive engagement. My frustration when I had a bad day at work. Subject displays signs of stress and withdrawal. Opportunity to test problem-solving and comfort-providing protocols. He'd even documented our arguments, not as disagreements, but as data points. He'd written about the times I'd been upset about something trivial, and he'd analyzed my body language, my tone of voice. He'd noted which apologies worked best, which reassurances elicited the quickest calming response. It was like he was dissecting me, piece by piece, in the sterile environment of his mind, and then meticulously recording the results. There were entries about my insecurities, things I'd only ever confided in him, things I thought were private burdens. He'd written about them with a cold detachment, like he was studying a specimen under a microscope. Subject exhibits recurring insecurities regarding self-worth, particularly in relation to career achievements. This presents a challenge and an opportunity to observe resilience factors. He'd even noted the exact moment I'd cried after a particularly harsh critique from my boss, his entry detailing my physiological responses: tear production, vocal tremor, slumped posture. And then I saw it, an entry from about a year ago when I'd been going through a rough patch with my family. I'd been withdrawn, emotional, and Liam had been incredibly supportive. He'd held me, listened to me, made me feel loved and safe. His entry: subject experiencing significant emotional distress, excellent opportunity to gauge the efficacy of sustained empathetic intervention. Behavioral response: increased reliance on primary caregiver. Self: objective: to observe the long-term impact of consistent emotional support on relationship dependency. It wasn't just that he was observing, it was the purpose behind it. He wasn't just documenting our life together, he was engineering it. He was testing theories, running hypotheses, all while I was falling deeper and deeper in love with him, believing every word, every gesture was born of genuine affection. My hands were slick with sweat. I flipped through more pages, my eyes scanning for anything that offered a glimmer of hope, a sign that this was some elaborate, misguided attempt at understanding me better, of loving me more. But there was nothing. Just cold, hard analysis. He'd even logged my ovulation cycles, alongside notes about our intimacy. Increased receptivity observed during fertile window, potential for procreation analysis in future phases. Procreation analysis. The words swam before my eyes. He was treating our entire relationship, our future, our potential family, as a scientific study. The binder fell from my trembling hands, hitting the carpet with a soft thud. I sank onto the floor, my back against his dresser, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The quiet of the room, which had always felt peaceful, now felt suffocating. The life I thought I had, the love I thought I'd found, it was all a lie. A meticulously constructed, beautifully executed lie. I stayed there for what felt like hours, the diary lying open on the floor, a testament to my own naivete. The setting sun cast long shadows across the room, and with each passing moment, the weight of the discovery pressed down on me, crushing me. I didn't hear the front door open, didn't hear his keys jingle in the lock. The first thing I registered was his voice, calling out, "Hey babe, I'm home." I didn't move. I couldn't. My body felt frozen, my mind a whirlwind of disbelief and searing pain. He walked into the bedroom, that familiar crooked smile on his face, a grocery bag in his hand. His smile faltered when he saw me, sitting on the floor, the diary open beside me. His eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw something other than calculated charm in them. It was fear, pure, unadulterated fear. "Alex," he said, his voice unnervingly quiet. "What are you doing?" I finally looked at him, really looked at him, and the man I saw was a stranger who had spent the last 3 years pretending to be the love of my life. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. All I could do was stare at the open diary, at the chilling words that had shattered my world, and wonder how I had been so blind. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken accusations, and the deafening roar on my own broken heart. The fear in his eyes, that's what hit me first, before the rage, before the crushing weight of every single memory I'd ever cherished with him turned to ash. It was fear, raw and primitive, mirroring the panic that was clawing its way up my throat. He'd been caught, not cheating, not with someone else, but with the truth, the meticulously constructed, clinical truth of his experiment. He dropped the grocery bag, an apple rolling across the hardwood floor, and coming to rest near my outstretched hand, a vibrant splash fred against the muted tones of my devastation. "Alex," he repeated, his voice a little stronger now, a desperate attempt to regain control. He took a hesitant step towards me, his gaze flicking between my face and the open binder. What are you doing with that?" I finally found my voice, though it was a raw, ragged thing, barely recognizable as my own. "What am I doing with it? Liam, what are you doing with it?" My voice cracked on the last word, the accusation hanging heavy in the air. I gestured vaguely at the open pages, the stark black text mocking me with its clinical dissection of my life. Project Nightingale. Subject, Alexandra Davies. Objective, to meticulously document and analyze the development and progression of a romantic partnership under controlled conditions. You've got to be kidding me.
He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd seen 1,000 times, but now it just looked like a man trying to smooth over a gaping wound. Alex, it's not what it looks like. Not entirely. My laugh was a harsh, broken sound. Not what it looks like? Liam, it's exactly what it looks like. It's my life, meticulously documented by you, as if I were some lab rat in a maze you were designing. Every conversation, every argument, every moment of happiness, every moment of pain. It's all just data to you, isn't it? Tears were starting to stream down my face, hot and stinging, but I didn't dare wipe them away. I wanted him to see the damage. No, Alex, that's not fair, he pleaded, his voice rising. It started as a way to understand how relationships work, how people connect. You were so open, so honest with me, and I wanted to process it, to learn. Learn? I finally pushed myself up to my feet, my legs shaky but fueled by a potent cocktail of anger and disbelief. I walked towards him, my eyes locked on his, searching for any flicker of genuine remorse, any sign that he understood the monstrousness of what he'd done. You learned by cataloging my every move, by dissecting my vulnerabilities? You wrote about the time my dog died, Liam. You wrote about how I cried for days, how I couldn't eat, how I felt like a piece of me was gone. Your entry said, subject exhibiting profound grief response, observe coping mechanisms and reliance on external comfort. External comfort? You mean you? You were testing if I'd rely on you more when I was hurting? He flinched, a visible reaction that brought a cruel satisfaction to my chest. I wanted to be the best partner for you, Alex. I thought if I understood all the variables, I could be everything you needed. Everything I needed? My voice was shaking now, the control I'd been clinging to slipping. You were everything I needed, Liam. I loved you. I trusted you. I thought we were building a life together, a real life, not some goddamn psychological study. You never loved me, did you? You were just observing, collecting data points. The words were a physical blow, each syllable laced with the pain of betrayal. That's not true, he exclaimed, his voice desperate. I do love you, Alex. This whole thing, it was stupid. It was wrong. I see that now. But it didn't negate what I felt for you. It was just a misguided project, a way to try and optimize. Optimize? I laughed again, a broken, strangled sound. My love is something to be optimized? My feelings are variables to be manipulated? You talk about Project Nightingale like it's some groundbreaking scientific discovery. But it's not, Liam. It's a betrayal. It's the most profound, soul-crushing betrayal I have ever experienced. I walked past him, my gaze sweeping over our shared living room, the photos on the mantelpiece, the couch where we'd spent countless hours laughing and talking. It all felt tainted now, every happy memory now a carefully documented observation for his project. I went into the kitchen, needing a moment, needing to breathe air that didn't feel thick with his lies. I grabbed a glass, my hands still trembling, and filled it with water. As I leaned against the counter, trying to steady myself, I caught sight of the calendar on the fridge. It was marked with our upcoming anniversary, a reservation for that new Italian place we'd been wanting to try, a reminder for Liam's parents' visit. All dates, all plans, all part of a life I'd believed in, a life he'd been systematically deconstructing. I picked up the binder again, flipping through the pages with a morbid fascination. I wasn't looking for answers anymore. I was looking for confirmation of the extent of his deception. He documented our finances, our sex life, even my sleep patterns. There was a section detailing my anxiety triggers and his strategies for de-escalation. It was terrifyingly comprehensive. Then I found it, a section titled Phase 2, Long-Term Commitment Integration. It was dated about 6 months ago, around the time he'd started acting a little more distant, the late nights at work increasing. He'd been researching wedding venues online, looking at rings. I thought he was planning a proposal, a beautiful romantic gesture, but his entries told a different story. Subject AD exhibiting increasing interest in long-term commitment markers, marriage, cohabitation stability. Hypothesis, this is a natural progression for a validated and secure relationship. Objective, to observe and document the impact of formalized commitment on relationship dynamics and individual subject behavior. Control variables, proposal simulation initiated, observation of engagement patterns and emotional response to simulated future planning. Proposal simulation.
He hadn't been planning to propose, he'd been simulating it. He'd been testing my reactions to the idea of marriage, to the idea of a future together. It was so clinical, so detached. It made the times he'd looked me in the eyes and told me he loved me feel like the cheapest of acting performances. I felt a cold dread settle over me. If he was already in phase 2, what was phase 3? What was the end game of Project Nightingale? I flipped through more pages, my eyes scanning for any mention of future plans, any hint of what came after formalized commitment. And then I saw it. An entry from just a few weeks ago. It was shorter than the others, almost scribbled. Preliminary analysis of phase 2 data suggests high success rate. Subject AD exhibits strong attachment and willingness to proceed. Consideration for phase 3, partner selection for procreation study. Candidates being screened based on genetic compatibility and emotional stability profiles. My breath hitched. Procreation study. Partner selection. I reread the words, my mind struggling to comprehend. He wasn't just studying our relationship, he was studying the potential for our offspring. He was screening other candidates. I stumbled back into the living room, the binder clutched in my hand like a weapon. Liam was standing there, looking pale and drawn. He'd clearly been listening, his face a mask of apprehension. What do you mean, screening other candidates? I managed to choke out, the words thick with dread. He hesitated, his eyes darting away from mine. It's part of the experiment, Alex. The ultimate goal was to understand the successful propagation of a stable, loving unit, to see if the observed principles could be replicated, improved upon. Replicated? My voice rose to a fever pitch. Improved upon? You were looking for other women, Liam? Other candidates to have children with? Not like that, he stammered, his hands held up defensively. It was theoretical, data collection, to see if the model held up under different parameters, to understand optimal pairings for long-term genetic success. Genetic success? I spat the words out, the sheer absurdity of it all threatening to push me over the edge. So you loved me? You wanted to marry me? Have kids with me? All while you were out there, secretly evaluating other women to see if they were a better genetic fit for your damn experiment? You were planning on having children with someone else? The thought was so vile, so abhorrent, it made me physically sick.
He looked genuinely distressed, but it was impossible for me to know if it was because he'd hurt me or because he'd been caught in his elaborate deception. Alex, please, you have to understand. This was years of work. It was fascinating, the insights I was gaining. Insights? I screamed, the sound tearing through the quiet apartment. You gained insights into my soul, and you used them to build a cage for me. You treated my love, my trust, my entire being as disposable components in your twisted game. And now you're telling me that you were already planning for phase 3? You were already looking for replacements? He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. It wasn't about replacing you. It was about the project, the data. If the model is sound, it should work with different variables. The implication hung in the air, a toxic cloud. I was just a variable, a successful, perhaps, but ultimately replaceable variable. The man I thought I'd spend my life with, the man I'd shared my deepest fears and wildest dreams with, was capable of seeing me as nothing more than a data point in his grand, amoral experiment. The pain was no longer just about the betrayal. It was about the fundamental misunderstanding of what love even was. He didn't get it. He never would. Get out, I said, my voice dangerously low and steady, a chilling calm settling over the storm inside me. Alex, no, please, get out, Liam, I repeated, my gaze unwavering. Get out of my apartment. Get out of my life. Take your data, take your simulations, take your optimal pairings, and disappear. I don't ever want to see you again. He stood there for a moment, a statue of disbelief and dawning realization. The fear was back in his eyes, but this time, it was mixed with something else. A dawning horror at the irreversible damage he'd inflicted. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, the words catching in his throat. He knew I meant it. He knew he'd finally broken something that could never be fixed. Slowly, he turned and walked towards the door. The silence now deafening. He paused for a fraction of a second, his hand on the doorknob, as if contemplating a final plea, but I stood my ground, my arms crossed,
my expression a hard, unyielding mask. He finally opened the door and stepped out, closing it softly behind him. The click of the lock echoed in the sudden emptiness of the apartment, a final punctuation mark on the end of everything. I stood there, frozen, the binder still in my hand. The silence was overwhelming, a tangible entity pressing in on me. Liam was gone. The life I'd built, the future I'd envisioned, it had all been a fabrication, a carefully orchestrated illusion. I sank back onto the couch, the tears now flowing freely, uncontrollably. I was alone, adrift in a sea of deceit, with only the chilling documentation of my own naive love as my companion. But as I looked down at the pages, at the cold, precise language detailing my every emotion, a new, terrifying thought began to form. A dark seed of doubt planted by his mention of other candidates. What if this wasn't just about Liam? What if Project Nightingale was bigger than just us? What if he wasn't the only one running these experiments? The implication sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins, a chilling premonition of a world far more deceptive than I had ever imagined. The binder slipped from my numb fingers, landing with a soft thud on the plush rug. For a long moment, I just stared at it. This testament to Liam's colossal lie. It wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a systematic dismantling of my very sense of self. He hadn't just deceived me. He had meticulously cataloged and dissected my love, my joy, my pain, reducing it all to a series of observable phenomena. The sheer audacity of it was staggering. He'd been right there, living with me, sleeping beside me, sharing my life, all while meticulously documenting my every breath for some twisted academic pursuit. My gaze drifted around the living room. The framed photos on the mantelpiece, once cherished memories, now felt like evidence. That candid shot of us laughing on the beach during our trip to Outer Banks, probably a peak moment of emotional vulnerability for his subject. The photo of me asleep, my head resting on his shoulder on the plane back from visiting my parents, a documented instance of reliance on external comfort. Every smile, every tear, every shared silence had been reduced to data points, logged and analyzed with detached precision. It was like finding out your entire childhood was a poorly staged play, and you were the unwitting protagonist. The silence in the apartment was no longer just the absence of Liam's voice. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket, woven from unspoken truths and shattered illusions. I needed to move, to break free from the inertia that was threatening to pull me under. I walked into the kitchen, the cool linoleum a stark contrast to the burning shame and anger that consumed me. I opened the refrigerator, not for sustenance, but for the simple act of doing something normal, something that had nothing to do with Liam or his monstrous project. My eyes landed on the grocery list, still magnetized to the door. Milk, eggs, bread, the mundane necessities of a life that no longer existed. Beneath it, a faded coupon for that local diner we loved, a place we'd celebrated my promotion, where he'd nervously told me he was falling in love with me. That memory, once so warm and golden, now felt like a carefully constructed trap. I closed the fridge. The metallic click echoed in the hollow space. The thought that had been lurking at the edges of my mind, the one that had sent that chill through me earlier, began to solidify. Partner selection for procreation study. It wasn't just about Liam wanting to understand relationships in abstract. It was about him seeing me as a potential component in a larger, more disturbing scheme. He wasn't just a lonely researcher trying to figure out love. He was a geneticist playing God, and I was his experimental subject in the early stages of what he deemed a successful unit. The implication sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. If he was screening other candidates, what did that mean for our future? Did he genuinely see me as a long-term partner, or just the most convenient and readily available option for the initial data collection? The thought of him in the intimate moments we shared, mentally cross-referencing me with other women, assessing our genetic compatibility and emotional stability profiles, made my skin crawl. It was a violation of the most profound kind, a desecration of intimacy. I walked back into the living room, my movements jerky, fueled by a frantic energy that was both terrifying and exhilarating. I needed to understand the scope of this. I needed to see if this was a localized madness or something more systemic. Liam had mentioned other candidates and different parameters. Was this a widespread phenomenon? Were there other men, other women, out there engaging in similar deceptions, all in the name of some twisted scientific advancement? My eyes fell on the binder again, lying innocently on the floor. I picked it up, my hands still trembling, but now with a desperate resolve. I flipped past the sections detailing our relationship, the intimate nuances he had so clinically dissected.
I was looking for anything that hinted suggested he wasn't the sole architect of this madness. There were cryptic references, vague allusions to a network of collaborators and observational hubs. He spoke of cross-validating methodologies and pooled anonymized datasets. It was all so deliberately obtuse, couched in the sterile language of scientific journals. But the intent was clear. He wasn't working alone. He was part of something bigger, something that extended far beyond the four walls of our apartment. Then I found it. A separate file, tucked into a side pocket of the binder, marked only with a small, faded red asterisk. My heart pounded in my chest as I opened it. It was a list. Names, coded alphanumeric identifiers, and brief, chilling notes. Subject 7B, high emotional volatility, successful early-stage integration. Subject 12F, appears stable, but potential for long-term commitment uncertain. Monitor integration with partner. And then, chillingly, a few entries down. Subject 4A, potential match for Phase 3 replication. High compatibility with established models. Further assessment required. My breath hitched. Subject 4A. Was that me? Was I a potential match for replication? Or was it another woman, someone Liam was considering as an alternative? The ambiguity was a cruel twist of the knife. He had documented my life with such detail, yet in this hidden ledger, I was reduced to a mere identifier, a data point in a larger pool of potential partners. I scrolled further, my eyes scanning the seemingly endless list. There were dozens, maybe even hundreds of these coded entries. Men and women all seemingly ensnared in their own versions of Project Nightingale. I saw references to urban environments, suburban studies, and even cross-cultural integrations, though that last part was quickly crossed out, as if acknowledging a boundary he himself had chosen not to breach, at least not directly. This wasn't just Liam's personal obsession. It was a sprawling, insidious network, a secret society of researchers not seeking to understand love, but to engineer it, to control it, to replicate it. They were playing with human hearts, with lives, with futures, all under the guise of scientific inquiry. The realization was like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I felt a profound sense of dread, a primal fear that this was only the tip of the iceberg. My hands were clammy as I clutched the binder. What was I supposed to do with this? Go to the police? Who would believe me? A story about a secret relationship experiment, a network of clandestine researchers, and a procreation study? I'd be laughed out of the precinct. But I couldn't just let it go. I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen this. Liam's words about optimizing and replicating echoed in my mind. If he was so confident in his methodology, if he believed he had cracked the code of human connection, what was to stop him, or others like him, from implementing their findings on a grand scale? I walked over to the window, looking out at the familiar cityscape, the twinkling lights that now seemed to hold a sinister glow. The world I thought I knew felt like a fragile illusion, a carefully constructed facade masking a much darker reality. How many other relationships were built on similar foundations of deceit? How many people were unknowingly participating in these elaborate psychological experiments, their deepest emotions commodified and analyzed? The anger that had been simmering within me began to morph into something colder, harder. It was no longer just about Liam, about the personal betrayal. It was about the inherent danger of unchecked ambition, of science devoid of ethics, of the human tendency to reduce complex beings to quantifiable data. I sank onto the edge of the sofa, the binder still open on my lap. The silence of the apartment was broken only by my ragged breathing. Liam was gone, but his legacy remained, etched in the cold, hard text of his experiment. He had taken my love and twisted it into a weapon against me, and now, in a twisted way, I had to figure out how to use what he had created against him, or at least against the system he represented. I looked at the list of names again. Subject 4A. Was it me? Was I just a prototype, or was I something more? The question gnawed at me, fueling a grim determination. I didn't have all the answers, not by a long shot, but I had the evidence. I had proof of Liam's deception, and perhaps, just perhaps, a glimpse into a larger, more disturbing truth. A
it was gone, shattered into a million pieces. But in the wreckage, something new was emerging. A fierce independence, a sharp awareness, and a deep, unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth, whatever the cost. I picked up my phone, my fingers moving with a newfound purpose. I needed to make a call. Not to Liam, not to anyone who knew him. I needed to reach out to someone who understood the dark corners of scientific ambition. Someone who wouldn't dismiss my story as the ravings of a scorned lover. It was a long shot, a Hail Mary, but I had to try. I scrolled through my contacts, my thumb hovering over a name I hadn't thought of in years. A former professor, a brilliant but eccentric woman who had always championed independent research and ethical scrutiny. She was my best hope. As I dialed the number, I looked back at the binder. The pages were still filled with Liam's meticulous notes, his cold calculations, his utter disregard for the human heart. But now, they also represented a starting point, a roadmap into a world I never knew existed. The fear was still there, a low thrum beneath the surface, but it was no longer paralyzing. It was a fuel, a reminder of what was at stake. I took a deep breath, the air in the apartment feeling suddenly lighter, cleaner, as if I had finally purged the last vestiges of Liam's suffocating presence. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning, and this time, I would be the one in control.